This episode is brought to you by the Central City Opera. This summer, Central City has talent from the Broadway stages of New York, the Met Opera in NYC, LA, and Chicago, and the best stages in Europe, all performing right in Denver's backyard. Central City Opera is focused on providing opera and musicals for the people. It's not just about tuxes and opera glasses, though you're welcome to dress up if you'd like, but folks can come in their Denver best, aka jeans and flannels. Tickets start at just $34, and listeners can use the code CityCast to get 20% off select dates. Go to centralcityopera.org/citycast to learn more.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Today on CityCast Denver. When City Council postpones a vote, it means they're looking at a really thorny issue. And when it comes to the current proposal to approve $800 million in taxes on tourism to expand the National Western Center in Globeville, Elaria, Swansea, they've postponed the vote twice. So today, I'm sitting down with people on both sides of the issue to figure out what's got council divided. Today is Tuesday, May 27th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Steve Nally, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Steve, you've been working on this project from inside the city and now with the National Western Center for more than 10 years. Can you give me sort of the too long didn't read short version of sort of how we got to this vote with City Council?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a long project. I worked as a city planner for many years at the city of Denver, starting in 2008 as an unpaid intern, working in these communities. And it's an exciting project. It's had a lot of planning, worked on the master plan and was adopted by City Council in 2015. And it identified key assets, including the Equestrian Center, a livestock center, other buildings, facilities, major new infrastructure, new riverfront open space, new streets, new connections, tying Globeville to Elyria. A lot of these ideas came out of the community work that we've been doing for more than a decade. So we're going to City Council for a vote on funding the Equestrian Center, which is one of those key assets that was identified early on.
So my understanding is that council is voting to sort of unlock this $800 million that's been delayed because some leaders of the Community Investment Fund and some neighborhood activists have been asking for this $16 million to fund more community benefits. Why not give that to them?
Would love to give that to them. I think that's part of our mission and our focus is to deliver these assets in a way that benefit the community. We started about 2 years ago talking about how this next asset, the Equestrian Center, could benefit the community. We asked the question, actually started with community members identifying, how might this benefit the community, and got a ton of ideas, 275 ideas, that we then put into our early procurement documents before even hiring the developer. And that's different than the typical process. Usually it's we go hire the developer, we know what we want to build, and then we go try to figure out what community benefits may come of that. We started with the community in this situation, and several of those ideas, including a 1% hotel room night fee, made it into the project support agreement and will be required as we deliver the project. I think the requests from the CIF committee in particular, which is part of the community, is we support them. We want to continue to support them. We provide their revenue, but we have to build the facilities first to generate the revenue to give to them. I think what they're asking for is money up front, and we don't have that money.
So I think what has been presented, though, is the parts of the community benefits agreements for them right now are projected to total around $9 million. Why not $16 million? Or, I guess I'm wondering, why not meet them where they are or make a promise to meet them where they want to be?
Yeah, so the Equestrian Center Hotel Housing Park and Garage project, we have projected over 35 years that the 1% hotel fee and the roundup that occurs in the Equestrian Center and at the hotel, food and bev offerings, and when you're checking out of your hotel, you could feel generous and round up. In addition to a fundraising day, we have projected that those would get to over $9 million. But that's just the Equestrian Center. We also have other assets on the campus. We're 2 phases into an 8-phase project. The other assets that are currently being operated and where we are rounding up and creating revenue for the CIF is the Stockyards Event Center and the Stockyards. And the Livestock Center will open in 2026. We're projecting just those 2 assets to deliver over $13 million over 35 years. So we have shared that all of these assets combined, it's over $22 million in proceeds to the Community Investment Fund. And again, that's just 2 phases of 8 phases. We have more facilities to build. That number will just grow.
So you mentioned this earlier, but the way that the community engagement process went for this maybe was a little different than previous projects where the community was brought in before the developer. And I know that you all at the National Western Center already feel like you've kind of gone above and beyond when it comes to offering community benefits. But it wasn't until the very last minute that you shared with City Council the addition of this 1% hotel room tax to help fund the Community Investment Fund. The board of the CIF says that was the first that they'd heard of it. Why didn't you involve the CIS in those talks?
It's not the first that they heard of the 1%. I mean, they were part of the community effort that informed there should be a fee. And I think this is we're being as transparent as we legally can be, and transparency is messy. We had that information, I think a day, maybe a few days before we shared it, that 1%, before we shared it with the CIF. We shared images of the actual agreement. It was still in draft form as soon as we could legally. Our attorneys they control us. we have to do things legally. And so I think that's, we own that. We have wanted to share that earlier. We got to what we think is the highest amount possible for the community, and also the mechanics of this deal is that we still have to reach a deal with the developer. And so by putting these numbers in, putting the 1% into the project support agreement, it can't change. This is going to be a tough deal. We still have to work on it. And we've set a number in negotiations with the city. We now have to go reach a deal with the authority with the developer. And so we were adamant that we list these community benefits in the project support agreement, so they could not change. Things may have to change in order to deliver this deal, and we want to ensure that community benefits don't.
So where did that 1% come from? Like, it could have been 2%, it could have been 0.5%. What was the 1%?
Yeah, so it was working really as a negotiation with the financial model of how much is the city willing to support through contingent payments to ensure the hotel is viable, especially in the early years. And so it was a negotiation between the Department of Finance at the city, between the developer, and between us pushing to try to get this fee as high as possible, and that's what the deal can handle.
Can you understand why the community leaders might feel like they aren't being treated as partners?
It's disappointing to hear, certainly. We are doing everything we can to treat them like partners. There are just certain legal requirements where they're not a party to an agreement, and they cannot be informed. Confidential information cannot be shared publicly, and so I think our negotiating position is informed by the input we receive from community members, but I understand that why they're frustrated.
So we've talked to some of these community members, and for them, it's the $16 million, but it's also this long history of feeling like they've been walked over. There's the I-70 expansion, there's Suncor, there's the use of eminent domain, and even if that $16 million isn't there, is there a plan to rebuild in that trust and relationship with the neighbors that have had this experience over decades?
Yes, I've certainly heard that since 2008. Been trying to keep my promises made since 2008. Certainly, this is an area of the city that was neglected for many years. I would say it's not neglected anymore. Certainly a lot of attention given with this project and the focus of this current administration and the previous administration to support these communities through infrastructure investments and other support that they've requested. There's a challenge with the time of delivery. We were having these discussions in 2015, 10 years later, and we're just now getting around to delivering assets and delivering revenue to these groups. It just takes a long time. Of course, we want to go faster. And I think that kind of dissonance of we asked for it and we're just now getting it certainly breaks trust. Also, there was an eminent domain. There is a highway going through the middle of this neighborhood. It happened in the 60s, and there's a reason it happened in the 60s. These communities didn't have a voice. CDOT decided to expand the highway in its current footprint. And I was very involved in that, working with these communities of saying, hey, how can we make this the best asset possible, recognizing that CDOT is going to put a highway or continue to put a highway through this area. And so,
yeah, that part's not ancient history. That's happened in the last few years.
Right. That's right.
So do you have a plan to rebuild that trust? Because again, you've been working on this area and watching it since 2008. What do you see as the city's role, or like what do you think needs to be done to mend that?
I don't work for the city, so I think the city can answer that. I think for the authority, we are all in. We are walking the talk. For example, 60 cents of every dollar that we spend on our services on the campus goes to a local, small, minority women-owned business. The outreach that we led around this project, starting with the community and making sure these ideas made it in, also just the other side of that message of people that may not be as informed on what we're doing are saying that we're not doing anything for them. And that message probably spreads faster than the positive things that we are able to perform. When we send out mailers to every single household and we try to spread the word about this thing that we're doing, people may not see it. They might just throw it in their recycling. I think it's junk mail. It also may not be that exciting for them, and they just may not want to engage. I tell terrible jokes, and I said, well, why don't we send a mailer out and say that there's going to be demolition of all the homes in the neighborhood as a joke, right? And people would say, let's engage in this. We have to, and we would get a lot of attendance, and we get a lot of people and say, hey, we're glad we could get you here. That's not what we're doing. Instead, we're focusing on this project. It's a terrible joke, but I think it is important to think about that people may not want to engage in something that isn't, immediately important to them. What
do you think is missing from this conversation that maybe like people like me in the media are not relaying, or what do you feel like has just not been, is there something that hasn't been reported yet about this? Because you've been working on this in this area from the city side and now from the National Western side for a long time.
Is there something that's not, I don't understand the question. Is there something that's not being
reported?
Like,
do you feel like there's a piece of the story that hasn't been told, or,
I think our enthusiasm around the investments that we've made and the lens that we look through for community, I don't think is as well known as it should be in the community. Like, for example, the new bridges, one of which has been built at 51st Avenue from Globeville into Elyria over the river. It's the first new bridge over the river since the 70s. That was an idea that came out of early work and dating back to 2008 of we like to get to one neighborhood to the other without using I-70. That's why it was one of the first phases of the project. Just the things like that where it was such an early idea and it has been delivered. Instead, it is getting, people are spinning that as, well, you did that for yourselves. And it's not true. We did it to connect the neighborhoods.
Well, Steve, thank you so much. That was Steve Nally from the National Western Center. And when we come back from a short break, I speak with one of the community leaders, Alfonso Espino of the GES Community Investment Fund. This episode is brought to you by Xcel Energy. The demand for electricity is growing, which is why, for more than 150 years, Xcel Energy has been improving the energy network as Denver grows. They've also committed to Colorado's goal of being completely carbon-free by 2050, and they're working to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, all while continuing to power Colorado's economy. Xcel Energy is investing to advance Colorado's ambitious clean energy goals while supporting Denver's innovative economy and maintaining an energy infrastructure that can handle severe weather events. They're also investing $22 billion in the next 5 years to deliver safe, reliable service at the lowest possible price. This means more clean sources of energy, more efficient distribution, and more reliability. Also, you can watch the next game or just flip on the lights. Do you know how hard it is to explain where energy comes from to a 3-year-old? Montgomery's like, Mom, where does electricity come from? And I'm like, Xcel? Want to know more? Visit xcelenergy.com/Colorado for more information about how Xcel Energy is planning for the future. That's xcelenergy.com/Colorado.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you, you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Alfonso Espino, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Thanks for having me.
So you all with the GES Community Investment Fund say you want $16 million if council is going to approve this $800 million to keep expanding the National Western Center. Where did you all come up with the $16 million?
The $60 million ask is a reflection of like a 1% match of like what's been invested in total into the National Western Center so far just for these first 2 phases. So it's like a ask that's really based on like equity. I don't think 1% is necessarily enough to be invested back into the community, but it would be a good gesture of intent by the city that they do mean to invest into the community.
So you feel like you all came with 1% as like a baseline, or, I mean, you could ask for 10%. You know what I mean? It sounds like you all came up with this number. Anything else like that went into that?
It sounded reasonable.
Where would the money go? What would you use it for?
Our biggest hope with the $16 million is to actually launch a revolving loan fund that could actually like start tackling some of the most important issues in the community. Housing is, of course, one of the most famous ones. And I know it's not just unique to our neighborhoods. Like if a small business owner wanted to start up their business, right? Like make it into a brick and mortar, that we could author a small business loan. Or that we could, be helping to purchase like land that could be cooperatively owned. Those are the things that would be possible with like a meaningful investment into the community investment fund. And I think a piece of it as well would also help us operate the community investment fund beyond one staff person.
Okay, so the National Western Center Authority says they've gone above and beyond the community benefits agreement that they're bound to, including apprenticeships at the hotel for community members, opportunities for local businesses, and a 1% tax on hotel rooms, with that money going to the Community Investment Fund. They value that at $9 million. Why do you all feel like that's not enough?
The Community Investment Fund was started to address the history of harm by these institutions. And to address the history of those harms, then you have to help the people that are there right now. Some of the people that are most vulnerable are the neighbors that are there right now, right? They're the ones that are being displaced en masse. And so their projections, or I think, first of all, I think it needs to be said, are, from our viewpoint, unreliable. Much of it is coming and being built out based on Roundup. That's part of their projections, is Roundup. Their projections on the 1% room fee are unclear to us how they got to those projections. We've tried to ask for the transparency of information about what are you basing this on? Like, is there like a study? Is there revenue generating projections? Like, where is this being based off of? Like, we brought up like the average vacancy rate is like 60%. And so when we pencil out the math, it doesn't match up with what the National Western Center Authority is saying.
Wait, what's the 60%? The
vacancy rate of hotels
in general
in the city of Denver.
Okay.
And then we also have to call into question, and this was a part of the initial reaction when they first came to us about the idea of a hotel, which is not an idea that came out of the community, right? This is an idea that is been that comes out of the partners. It's their desire to see a hotel there. And the implication is that this hotel could not exist without a subsidy. And so that's where the questioning about like, how can you project such revenue streams that you won't let us see, how you're actually penciling this out. And then I think the most important thing, if people look at those documents that the National Western Center has provided, it's over the course of like 30 or 40 years. And so 30 or 40 years, this is a game that developers often play. You know, we won't have to deal with the same people in 40 years. Or that the people that will get to benefit, if that money does come to fruition, won't be the same people that this investment fund was supposed to be built for.
Would you all, what's wrong with the hotel being there?
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the hotel being there. I'm just saying that in the market, it has to be feasible.
So that's all your concern sort of around this 1% lodger's tax that they've proposed to go to you. You're saying this hotel's potentially not going to have enough people even staying in it to make that money worthwhile? Well,
the 1% is a room fee. So it's a 1% room fee every night that somebody stays there. I think what's important is that, like, what is it penciled out to? Right? Like we can't comfortably sit there and accept the 1% when we don't know what their projections on revenues actually are. Like, is 1% significant? Is 1% meaningful? We never got a chance to talk about that. We never got a chance to negotiate. If we would have had the opportunity to look at the pro formas, to look at their projections and any of the internal dialogue that they had, that they excluded us from, we would have been able to better assess what 1% actually signifies and what it could actually produce.
And what do you say to the authority saying, like, we had dozens of community meetings, like we did reach out to the community to create what we ended up creating?
Well, one thing is to have a meeting and one thing is for a meeting to have substance. It's one thing to call a meeting and have dozens of them, which I'm not denying that they did. You know, we were at a few of them. But it's just a typical process where, like, hey, we decided that we need a hotel that we want, and it's our duty to build a new equestrian center. What color would you like to see it painted? That's a very different conversation to, like, let's look at the need of the neighborhoods and have a conversation about, like, what we can build into place based on that. And so it's coming from the opposite direction. It's fulfilling a need for the National Western Center and its partners first and foremost. The majority of that investment is going straight back into them. And by extension, I guess, tourists and visitors to the National Western Center. That does not pencil down back into benefiting the community. I personally also have a lot of reservations when there's, like, conversations about, like, jobs, because one of the most recent examples was the I-70 expansion. That's one of the things that they kept promising our community when they were talking about taking 200 homes originally, and it penciled down to 56 homes were taking. And one of the things that they always stuck by was, like, this is going to bring jobs to the community. They're going to be union jobs. And what actually happened was, over the course of, like, 6 years of construction, 2 people got hired out of the community.
So we heard from some residents of GES who showed up to a council meeting to advocate for the expansion of the proposed deal. Some of these folks think that the National Western Center folks have done right by them and the neighborhood, and they see this as an opportunity. Why do you think they're wrong?
I don't think they're wrong. And I think that needs to be clear, that we are not in opposition of their development of a hotel and equestrian center, but we are not satisfied with the benefits that they're presenting. And those neighbors, the few that showed up to speak in favor of that, they're well within their right to. They've made their assessments. But from our perspective, specifically from the Community Investment Fund and what's supposed to be the benefits directed towards the investment fund, which we are tasked with growing, with which we are tasked with it going back to our community, it's nowhere near enough.
So I read the ballot language of when voters approved this tax money way back in 2015. I don't know if I saw anywhere that there's anything about supporting a neighborhood garden or, like, home repairs like you were talking about. What would you maybe say to a voter who might be thinking, like, I don't want the National Western Center to give up any of this tax money for something I didn't vote for.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if a hotel was in that language either originally. It's all about political will and how you interpret that document. And in our reading of the 2C language, there's, I think, a lot of room to make the argument that you could propose community-based needs and in turn projects that could be funded by that. I just don't think that that's an argument that they want to see as valid. It doesn't mean it's incorrect. It just means that they're not willing to view it in that way.
What is set to happen with this council vote? Because I have to say I'm a little bit confused because it's like there's an assumption that it's just going to pass.
I think that there's mechanisms at council where, when something like this is presented to them, they have 30 days to act and vote on it. And if they don't, then it automatically passes. So that's part of what's happening here. What we've asked to happen, and thankfully, and we thank the support of some of the council members that have stuck with us and see where we're coming from and have seen the context behind the scenes as well about being shut out in like serious negotiations for revenue streams, serious, significant, and more immediate, I think is the important thing. They've helped us to delay it in hopes of just opening up and bringing them back to the table. And they've jerked us around. And some council members on Monday expressed like, well, what's the tactic with delays? Like, you're not going to get anything out of it. Some of them even condescendingly spoke about you're leading people on to something that you can't win. And for us, it's not about winning or losing. It's about doing our job. I don't think that anybody in our position that's trying to execute the job faithfully would accept not having had a real negotiation and would not accept projections that you don't see the evidence for how they're penciling out, how they're doing the math. I don't think anybody in their right mind, if somebody came to offer you to buy your house, right, that you don't know where the money's coming from to seal the deal, are you going to sell your house? I don't think so, right? Like, you need security in that there's like good faith behind the intent. And we don't believe that there's good faith. And just based off of the, we've had meetings with the authority. We've had meetings and there's been little substance. Every time we've asked for documents, every time we've asked for anything, it's like, well, we can't get that to you right now, right? The first time we heard about how much they were going to council to ask for to trigger to get out of 2C was 3 weeks ago when council found out. That's not right. That's not how you treat partners. Right. And this is the conversation that happens in the background, that they reassure us after jerking us around for so long that they see us as partners, that they see us as a vital, important part of the National Western Center redevelopment, right? That there has to be this stake in it for the neighbors to be benefiting concretely from the redevelopment. And if that's how you treat partners, I don't want to know how you treat everybody else,
Alfonso, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your city council person about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your city council person about us? Sorry, you're moving the document. It's okay.